On now. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's 6:01, and I hope folks online can hear me as well. It's 6:01, so I'll ask everyone to start getting settled in, but we will still give it a few minutes before getting started. But for folks in the room, please feel free to finish grabbing food. You'll also have another opportunity to do that during the break, or really throughout. Feel free to get food whenever. There are bathrooms. If you take a left through the elevators and then another right after the elevators, that's where you'll find the bathrooms. And yeah, we'll be taking a 10-minute break after viewing the film, so keep that in mind. But again, feel free to, meet your needs throughout the meeting. But yeah, we're gonna give it just a few minutes and then we'll get started.
Recording in progress. basically, we want to just like set up kind of why we're here, and I think it's really a lot about trust in how these processes work and the community having that information. And so I think the film really speaks to that, and hopefully that'll come out in the conversation as well. But what does transparency mean, and what does like knowing how I will be policed mean, and how can I trust those processes and know if I show up in this way, this is what might happen, things like that. And so I think like those things really set us up to engage with topics of transparency and accountability, and that's really why PCCEP's here and why we're here tonight. And so just a little bit of background information on PCCEP's work with PPB and protests. We've been working a lot over the past few months to understand the dynamics of trust and transparency between PPB and protesters, and really trying to figure out what it is that the community feels there's a place where there's transparency perhaps lacking, and where we can kind of come in and support that information sharing and gathering. And also this comes with the new rapid response team starting up again, which is like Portland Police's crowd control team. And we've learned a lot about changes that have happened to the new team. And we also, I think, want more information, and we've heard that from the community as well. So that kind of ties in to why we're here tonight when we talk about protests, but the specific film we're gonna be reviewing is not about RRT specifically, but just about police response. And then lastly, we understand that PPB has done things to improve their crowd control team and have taken steps, which a lot of which have been kind of outlined in the Independent Monitor LLC's report. And I think a new one is coming out soon, yeah. And I guess we want to just learn more about those policies and procedures and help the community learn more about them. And this conversation tonight, I think, really boils down to one of trust, like I've said a few times now, in transparency, but really how trust has been damaged in the past, and how, like what's required for like accountability and transparency, and what are the community members' needs in that, and how can we be kind of a liaison to those desires. Do you want to add?
Thanks, Delia. And I just want to echo again that the role of what PCCEP wants to do today is, again, be a clearinghouse of information and be helpful in that space that is our job of bridging that communication and eventual trust gap between the city, PPB, and the community. So that this is just kind of one of those opportunities to do that.
Great, thank you so much to our PCCEP members, Odelia and Ashley. Now we're gonna pass it over to Robert Mackey, an investigative journalist who created the film, or worked on the film that we are gonna be watching in just a few minutes, and he's gonna speak a little bit about some background.
Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for coming and for joining online. I'll keep this short because I think the film, one of the strengths of what we were able to do is that the people who experience this themselves basically tell their own story. But some background in case people don't know at all, this is about an attack on a racial justice march was gathering to start at Normandale Park in Portland in February of 2022. And before it got underway, someone who lived in the area who objected to, and had been quite outspoken on Telegram and other places online, to Black Lives Matter, to protests, and specifically to anti-fascist volunteers who helped facilitate the protests and keep protesters safe, confronted a group of unarmed corkers. These are traffic safety volunteers who use their bodies, bicycles, motorcycles, or cars to form a protective bubble around protest marches to keep people safe. And so, I mean, so I'm sure maybe a lot or all of you know the story, so I won't say too much about it, but the one key thing that happened that as a journalist I thought had to be investigated was that the police, within hours of the attack, released a statement saying that a preliminary investigation had revealed that the incident started with a confrontation between what they called an armed homeowner and armed protesters. And a lot of things were wrong with that statement. First of all, what happened was an unprovoked shooting attack, a mass shooting from a right-wing extremist on people that he saw as the enemy. And it was only ended when an armed volunteer for the protest came running over to the scene, fired back, disarmed the attacker, and then directed medical treatment that saved his life. So that's quite different than what the police statement said. And if you want to see the police statement, you can, because it's still on the PPP website. The statement was updated several times to add information over the weeks after it, but that was never corrected, even though, as you'll see, the police were in possession of video evidence that showed that this was an unprovoked attack, and within hours they released the armed guard who had fired back, who they initially intended to charge, but then the video revealed to them that it was, as the then deputy DA, who's about to be the DA, Nathan Vasquez, told me, a lawful shooting, self-defense, community self-defense. So I won't say too much more about it, but I would say that the group that I worked with to produce this forensic architecture is a research agency based in London that investigates human rights abuses around the world and tries to help victims and survivors tell their own stories. And I think that the strength of this, and I hope you'll agree, is that you hear people describe things who witnessed them firsthand, who were basically denied the opportunity to do that in the legal process, and their story corrects what the police put out that remains false. And the question of why that was never corrected is difficult to understand, in part for me because the police refused to talk to me. They stood by their statement. One of the press officers refused to make senior police officers available for an interview, and kind of angrily rejected the idea that the statement was incorrect, which it objectively is. So anyway, I will talk about this for 3 hours if someone doesn't stop me, but I think it's important. The thing I would also add, one thing I would add is, I think the film itself, it's obviously difficult to watch. It does include some of the raw footage of the shooting. There's no actual warning in the film when it's coming, but you get a sense from the context, I think, when that comes up. There's about a minute of the shooting itself. And if people want to know more, there is some more information from my investigation that was published with the video in The Guardian, on the Guardian website in February. And so there's some information in there, details of the investigation that I wasn't able to get into the film that I think are relevant, and I would encourage you to check that out too. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Hello, everyone. My name is Afrita Davis, and I will be supporting and facilitation with this meeting. And I have been supporting PCCEP's work for a couple of years now. I'm just going to give a brief content warning beforehand, do some framing and some options for you while watching the video, and then we're going to go ahead and launch into the video. What you're about to watch is a digitized visualization of the events, visualization of the events, actual footage, and actual audio of a disturbing event involving gun violence. The purpose of showing this partial recreation and actual footage is to create an objective perspective of the events that took place. Please be aware that that footage of the traumatic incident begins around 1830 as a timestamp and ends around 30:30. So at those times or before those times, we'll kind of like hover above, over the screen and give a note in the comments for folks to know that it's approaching that time, so you'll know. We encourage that you take care of yourself during this time. Depending upon your own personal experience with traumatic events, it can be a triggering event. So we ask that if you need to step out, please do that. Please take care of yourself. Listen to your body. If your body says move, go ahead and move, and we'll be positioned at the door to let you in and out. So, take care of yourself there. Also, remember breathing techniques, and if you are aware of pressure techniques that work with you, go ahead and utilize those techniques as well. After this video is showed, we're going to have a break, so there'll be some more time for people to take care of themselves, and then we'll enter in a Q&A. For our virtual participants, if you have questions throughout the video, you may put them in the Q&A portion of the chat, and we will address them when we get to the Q&A portion, or you can also wait till we get to the Q&A portion to raise your virtual hand, and we'll be sure to call on you at that time as well. So, okay, I turn it over.
I thought it was really awesome that we had an older lady out working with us. I just thought here's a quirky, queer lady in Portland who wants to work with us.
She was just out there on a regular basis. She was like, that grandma figure to everyone. She was super friendly, super sweet, super nice.
She was like the final boss of people that would stand up to anyone.
We got corkers on 5th. Take it. Hey, we have a demonstration coming through. Do you want to take a quick left? Okay, let me get ahead of you and I'll help you get out. Hey, sorry to inconvenience you. There's a demonstration coming through. They're a couple blocks down and they're gonna take a right here on Yamhill. So you could probably escape in the next 2 minutes. So are you ready to go now? I can help you get out. Thank you.
Our entire purpose is to prevent chaos. And it's something that, we always try and reiterate to people is we're not blocking streets, we're redirecting traffic. Our whole purpose is to keep traffic moving.
Let's take it. Do we got this corked on this end?
It's not just about creating a wall of vehicles. You have to think about, if somebody wanted to get through here, what clever way could they find to do that? And I think it made us good at finding vulnerabilities that can be easily missed.
The basic idea of quirking is to create a bubble around protesters, and a bubble that is a barricade. The purpose of the bubble is not only to physically prevent attacks on a protest, but also to provide a buffer zone of de-escalators. So if someone comes in who's angry, who's agitated, even somebody who's armed, we're able to give kind of a heads up for the crowds so they're able to be safe.
At the rear of the march, there's just a rear motorcade and they just function as a wall. They maintain the pace of the march. They maintain a close enough distance to the end of the march so that any cars can't get in. Up at the front are the pushers, and that is the more dangerous role because it involves actively pushing against traffic and turning cars around. And the logistics of that involves sort of moving as a slinky. The motorcycles or the bicycles will usually, lane split, and they just pull up to that next intersection and stop. And there's a block of traffic behind them still. As soon as that traffic pulls out, then the push cars can then move forward, and then the motorcycles can jump forward again.
I mean, generally bicycles would be moving up and down the sidewalks here. If we're close in, a lot of times we are close in. One of the things we'll do is to go kind of a block out where you're showing this motorcycle over here. And so we'll be doing that same leapfrogging thing, but instead of going on the sidewalks, we're going on that next street on the grid to get around people. So right now that one's holding that car, and we would wait until we see the cars in the rear go through this intersection, and then that's sort of the cue to move up to the next one.
Even if we're corking a block out, it's good to have one extra person there corking tight because there can be parking garages. People who are just parked may pull out in their cars, and if you don't have somebody here and you don't catch them, you're just hoping that they're going to get to the crowd and not be inclined to run people over. I mean, we're functioning as, human shields. We're on a perimeter. People generally don't know that we're there. And anybody who wants to get to Antifa or make them hurt a little bit, they have to get through us. And our whole gig is that we don't move.
Sometimes it was just verbally aggressive people. There were other times that we had people with weapons or people who would shove other people. And of course, we had many guns pointed at us.
No. Hey, easy. We're just trying to direct you around people.
There would be people that would spin the block on us. They got out of the area, they would come back just to antagonize us.
Get out of here! I'll put a block your fucking tires, dude. Make sure that's a motherfucker.
And those people, the mayor just gave them a green light.
I also want you to know that these people often arrive at their so-called direct actions in cars, and they're all dressed in all black. The city of Portland will not tolerate criminal destruction or violence. For those who are engaged in it, let's make it hurt them a little bit.
Myself, and I know every corker who heard him say that just immediately thought, somebody's going to die. You're going to get somebody killed. Specifically, you're going to get one of my friends killed with this comment.
This was probably one of the most deadly and challenging weekends our city has experienced. We ultimately found one person deceased and 5 injured and determined it was a confrontation between an armed resident of the area and armed protesters.
The police in Portland really don't like us, and I am certain that influenced the way that the statement went. They were saying things to push a narrative that we deserved the shooting, and it couldn't be further from the truth.
Hey, I'm Jemana. I'd like you to think of me as the extension to the interview with Rob. Basically, I'll be controlling the 3D model from London from the other side, and as you recall your memories, I will reflect them onto the 3D model. The 3D model is of Normandale Park and its surrounding areas. This was constructed by taking hundreds of photographs of the site that we processed to make this photogrammetry model measurable to the millimeter. And combining this with your memory helps us achieve as much spatial accuracy as possible.
Okay. "7 p.m. I arrived. Normally I get out and put up my Black Lives Matters flag and cover my license, but My intuition was telling me not to do that night.
I think I got there at 7:15. There were only like 2 people because everybody was late, as always.
I got there around 7:24. I parked right next to June's car.
I remember that I was running late, so I was like a little bit rushed. Since I was a little bit late, I was one of the last to find a parking space.
I never saw the crowd. They were on the complete opposite end of the park. As you can see from looking at the model, there's tons of trees, there's a building, there's a baseball-like field in between, and it's very, very difficult to see at nighttime, especially because it gets backlit by the neighborhood that's around it.
So you were with who and where when Smith first came up to you?
So when he first came up to us, I believe that we were in between my truck and Dake's car. In this space here, this is like a gravelly section, and I believe that we were standing on the gravel.
Okay.
So yeah, roughly there.
So he came up and you were standing a little further back towards the park?
Yes.
I think that I was a little bit closer to June's car.
Around here?
Yeah. And then I told him that there was going to be a peaceful march for Duante Wright and Amir Locke. I mentioned that we had flyers, that I didn't have one, but that I'm sure that some people in the crowd on the other side of the park did.
He did ask a strange question, though. Like, we get, tons of people coming up to us just, oh, what's happening tonight? What's this for? Who are you all? But we didn't really get any of the standard questions from him. The question that we got from him was, how long are you going to be here? Like, you specifically.
So she said, we're leaving at 8, and he pulled up his watch and he said, at 7:30, you're leaving at 8. She confirmed that. He said, yeah, okay, it's 7:30. And that's the last thing I remember. And I think he walked away at that point.
We always do pre-meets close to T-Rex's car just because of hurricane. And I want to say that pre-meet happened around 7:40.
Those people being corkers, medics, a lot of de-escalators. I don't think any of the other people who were openly carrying that night were on my side of the park.
I have a patch that says very clearly medic. I have a big red cross on my back. I mean, my job is to be available if something goes really bad.
That's figuring out, how we're going to communicate with each other and, generally, how things are going to go, how we're going to start off.
And that's when Deja told me that we had changed the initial part of the route. There was some unhoused neighbors that were camped around the corner, and we just thought, it's going to be 8 o'clock at night. We don't need to be drumming and making a lot of noise past those people.
When the pre-meet ended, then I got in the truck with T-Rex and we just were catching up. Well, I hadn't seen her in a while. She was on vacation. And I don't know why the topic came up, but the topic of love came up. And I was criticizing love. And the last thing she said to me, because we got the radio call to get ready, because they were going to start marching, so it's pushing 8 o'clock now. And the last thing she said to me was, I love you, and then she called me by my name.
I got my bike, I started walking off, and was talking with Hank, and kind of looked over, and I could see a person, right by that tree on that corner over here. So over there.
This one?
Yeah, that one. And that night, the street light was out. I don't know if that makes a huge difference.
That street light was out?
Yeah, those were out, so that was dark, but you could see, I could see this dude just there. He had long hair, he had the shorts or whatever he was wearing, but he was smoking a cigarette and looked not happy with us being there. So I shared that with Hank and I left. Kind of I just went around the corner, passing right in front of him, and then heading out to the other side of the park.
And I went to go tell the march the updated plan, and then Cass asked if they could ride on the back of my bike through the park.
A couple people went back to my car with me, put my gun in my trunk. While I was there, I started hearing some elevated voices coming from the intersection.
Something's happening. You know, the voices are raising. It's important for me to get a look at the situation, so I'm headed that way.
And he came up to us just, you know, with his finger in the air, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "You fucking cunts." And we're like, whoa, like, excuse me? And, you know, just yelling, you know, "You're fucking terrorists, get the fuck out of my neighborhood." Deg turned around to face him. I stepped forward. So I said, you know, "We are leaving." And I was like, "It's okay, you want us to leave. I am literally getting into my vehicle. You can see that we are leaving." And, you know, his response to that was, "If I ever see you again, I'm gonna shoot you in the head."
You know, June's wife asked us at some point, you know, at what point did we know that he could not be de-escalated? And my response was immediately, as soon as I heard, before I even hit record, as soon as I heard what he was saying. It was a solid 20 or 30 seconds that I was standing there facing them watching it before I hit record. He was doing this thing where he would kind of start to walk away and come back, and I was like, maybe he's gonna actually walk away. And then he didn't. And that's around the time that I hit record.
I get out of the car and I slam my door really hard because I was mad. And he turns and looks at me, and it's silent for like a solid 3 seconds where we're just looking at each other. So you can see in the video, I'm pushing him back because he stepped towards me, and he came towards me because he was walking towards me, and I said, "You're close enough," and that's when he charged me.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, let's go! Why don't you just go home and talk tonight? Because you fuckers come in here and start this fucking shit. This is fucking ridiculous. You're close enough. Don't come any closer to me. Do something. Do something. Don't come closer to me. Do not. That's assault. Stay the fuck away from me. Fuck you. Get the fuck out of here. I don't want to fight with you. Just go home.
I'm sitting in my driver's seat. I do seatbelt, turn it on, windows, turn my car radio off. I'm like messing with my headset, and I hear yelling, and I could see him, because the thing that made me, you know, almost get out of my truck is that when I looked up, you know, from doing my checklist of things, I saw that not only was Deg not in her car like I thought she was, but I could see that T-Rex was getting out of her truck.
Yeah.
And like my stomach like sank. And I just remember going through my mind, I was like, oh my God, no.
You are out of here. You go. Push me. Do something.
I feel like everybody's not as scared as me, and I don't know why, but it was very obvious through the, you know, minute and a half that this was unfolding that he was trying to engineer a stand your ground situation. The charge at Allie, the constant like, do something, make me go, like, yeah, let's do this. It just felt to me like he was a bomb.
And especially after having him charge me, I like wanted to hit him, you know? And so that's not conducive towards de-escalating. That's an escalation. So I'm like, I'm gonna walk away.
And then I remember being right behind June. I remember just with everyone coming, just being like, I don't know who has what, but I'm waiting for him to make a move if I need to Mason.
We need de-escalation to the corner of the park immediately where the cars are parked immediately.
We turned the corner when we heard the call for de-escalators. You know, we want to de-escalate, but there's also, sometimes it can be kind of intimidating. So we were thinking about how can we come to what we could tell from Deja's voice was an escalated situation without adding more tension.
Right as I turned around the second time, I don't remember seeing it because it happened too fast, but in the video you can see that he's starting to reach into his waistband or his pocket.
Yeah.
And that's when he was pulling the gun out. So I had just turned my head when he got it out. And
as I was crouched down, I was watching them and thinking that I was gonna have to grab him from behind to like get him off of her. And when I had that thought was when he raised the gun with his right hand and shot her through the mouth.
He didn't brandish the weapon or do anything, he just immediately shot?
No, it was like draw, shoot. Yeah.
So you actually saw quite clearly him shooting June?
Yeah.
Can I open the video, or is that something, or should we stay in the model space?
You can open the video, that's okay.
Gunshots, gunshots, gunshots.
It's like you have to slow it down a lot because that scene is also, Deja's moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see Deg falling, you can see me falling, and you can see his second shot into me, which I think was probably my neck.
So you were turning away from him as he shot you?
Yeah.
I have my vehicle, that's the only weapon that I have. And at this point, you know, he's standing reasonably in a position where I could hit him. And I, you know, had my head down and I was like, okay, whatever. I have 1 second to do this. I think it's 2 clicks and I floored it and I was in neutral. And, you know, my engine just revved and I was like, I'm not moving. He was right in front of me. My truck is very loud. Like, surely he heard that. So I was like, I need to see where he is. Is he coming over? And as I look up, I watch him shoot Allie.
I mean, how do you prepare for this? Like, I'm standing at a park with my friends. We're alone. We're not near the protest. We're not blocking this guy's way. We're not by his house. I didn't expect it to be here. I didn't expect it to be my friends. I didn't expect us to be cornered.
You didn't know yet at that stage that Smith had been shot?
No, we had no idea because I was already behind the truck when the guard fired back, and there had been these 2 volleys of shots already. There was a pause, and it was while he was swinging back to Allie. So when there was a pause again, and we didn't know that the guard had shot back, we were just all sitting there expecting him to just appear and kill us.
You know, I hear the first shots. I started sprinting up 55th, kind of along on the outside of the cars. I didn't want to be running up the middle of the street. And I can see muzzle flashes over the hoods of cars, and I can hear people screaming. As I am, you know, running up, I can see him. I get this perfect lane between the cabins of 2 cars, and he is standing there, and I raise my weapon, and I'm watching him, you know, through the reticle, and I fire twice.
Then it was quiet for a second. I couldn't distinguish his shots from the shots of the guard. You know, he was so close to me, it was so loud that I couldn't tell that that had happened. Basically, as I was getting out, like I was like, oh, he's just reloading. And as I get out, he's gonna shoot at me. So I need to take cover behind my truck, and everyone else who's here is dead or shot. And so I need to get this 911 call off. And even if he shoots me, like, it's started.
911, what is the address of the emergency?
I need a fucking ambulance at 55th and Hawthorne. There's people that have been shot.
Okay, let me get some help going that way. You said 55th and Hawthorne?
Northeast 55th and Hassalo.
Hassalo, okay.
The southwest corner of Normandale Park.
Okay, all right, let me get them going that way. Stay on the line with me.
We need a medic. We need a medic right now. We need a medic. Kira. Hey.
I asked him, where's the gun? Where's the gun? And he pointed towards like his left ankle. He said, it's right there. But, you know, I wish I still had it so that I could put it in my mouth, and then pulled it away from him. And I set it kind of like underneath one of the cars nearby.
My immediate impression was that T-Rex had passed, and I walked right past. I walked right past Egg, and I just didn't notice. They weren't. It just didn't register with me who they were.
When I walked up to her and was kneeling down to treat her, I said, hey, I love you and I've got you. And I immediately put my right hand at the wound in her neck, applying lateral pressure. The other medic, he was like, I've also been shot in the head. And I remember looking up and seeing a hole in his beanie and thinking, so you have.
You know, he's bleeding pretty profusely. He has an entry wound, kind of like to the side of his forehead, and then he has an exit wound. And I tell him, like, I'm just gonna wrap your head because that's really all I can do right now. Also, at some point during all of this, someone else came up who has medical training and asked, who is this? What's going on with this guy? And I say, that's the shooter, and he needs to be treated. He looks at that guy and he says, okay. And he goes and he assesses and treats him. And so, you know, even in spite of what this guy did, we gave him the best care that we could.
T-Rex. T-Rex. June, I'm right here, okay? I'm right here. Stay with me, okay?
I didn't think that she was going to live, whatever it was. I didn't feel like that, but I also didn't think that she was gone yet. And I had this just like moment where I returned to my body and realized that my camera was in her face.
You'd taken your helmet off when you realized that this flashing light was
Yeah,
in
I
June's
took the helmet
face,
off.
And you put it down and left it.
Exactly. I
near.
pulled it off, you know, grabbed it by the chin, took it off, and just set it next to me.
June, listen. Hey. I'm right here, okay? Who else got hurt? I'm right here with you. I'm right here with you.
Yeah, so you got hit. We need to treat you. 646, real quick update. 2 people shot each other. Sounds like our caller's friend is down but moving. Second one is shot in the chest. Okay. And again, this is an anti-police protest that is nearby. So for safety, anti-police protest nearby.
I remember seeing the flashing lights and feeling both like relieved and nervous because it was like, oh, the EMTs are here finally, and realizing it wasn't EMTs, it was cops.
The cars pull down, I walk up to them, you know, I register that Pill and Cass are with me. The cars turn on, they have like these side, like, spotlights. We're in that sort of like movie, like tactical position, like doors open, like braced in between the doors and like the body of their vehicles with their weapons.
I just remember them pointing at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just knew from my life experience that I need to hold very still, keep my hands way up in the air, and not even breathe.
Then I said, hey, I'm an EMT, 6 people have been shot. Can I go back to treating my patients, please? And they said, 6 people have been shot? And I said, what the fuck do you think you're here for?
I cut in front of Cass, and I put my hand on both of the cars, like I think the Bronco was leaving right then, and just started screaming, will you fucking help us? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Hey, we have 5 people shot. I need them to you. Fucking help us. We have 6 people shot. We need medics now. 6 people. 6 people. We need medics. Okay.
They acknowledged what I had said and said that it was okay for me to go back in one way or another, so I went back to treating people.
And have us secure the house. We got multiple angles.
Cops descended on my car. One of them started like banging on my window and then just kept asking me how many people were in the park. Not who shot you, not what happened. They wanted to know about the protest. At that point, Cass came over to me and was demanding to treat me. They were fighting with them about treating me.
I said, she's been shot 4 times. You don't need to interview her right now. She needs medical attention.
Did they help you in any way?
No.
For a while, it was only police and no paramedics. The only people administering medical aid are our people.
While I'm holding Dig, my whole focus is like, I'm just a rock. I'm just a rock holding this person's, holding this person's neck together.
The first ambulance rolled up, and I wanted to go talk to them around who my patients were. They did not listen to me. This is when I was moving, and I got grabbed by the police.
That's visible on Deja's video from her helmet from the ground?
Yeah.
I have my glasses. It's the arm to my glasses. You're not gonna find it. It's in the.
He says, this is a homicide investigation. If you don't get off the scene, you're gonna be arrested. Only people actively actively engaged in medical treatment can be on here.
He actually grabbed you?
Yeah, he grabbed me. He did not care. And so he started moving me in the direction of that corner, and I was no longer allowed on a scene where people I cared about were hurting and dying.
In that moment, I was very much not in my body and was just kind of swinging wildly between like sobbing and like making a sarcastic comment and then arguing with the cop to get up. The cop asks like, did anybody have any weapons? And like, then I start sobbing.
We're fucking traffic partners. Why are you shooting at us? All we do is keep people safe. All we do is protect people. Why would you shoot us?
And you told the cop, no one had any weapons.
No, nobody had any weapons. He came up to us and he started a fight. And June got out of her car. She's 60. She told him to leave and he fucking shot her. That's what I said.
975. We just had a guy with a rifle walk up to us on 55th with his hands up. He says he's involved in this. Would not like to speak us any further, but like to speak to a lawyer. So we'll have him with us.
Police say a confrontation between an armed neighbor and an armed protester resulted in gunfire Saturday night, leaving one woman dead.
Police say armed protesters and an armed homeowner got into a fight
and began shooting.
Police say their preliminary investigation indicates it began as a confrontation between armed protesters and an armed homeowner. Moments later, shots rang out. Last night,
I guess I got to give it to them. It was a well-crafted narrative. You know, it's pretty wild how one word like homeowner can really shape a narrative like that. You know, that like we, you know, as a mob, like went up to this guy's house and like he shot us in self-defense.
Not only is Smith not a homeowner, we were not armed. We were in a public space, so we were on a road next to a public park. We never entered his personal space. We never threatened him. None of us approached him. It was him acting towards us and us defending ourselves.
I mean, even if we had been in a crowd of protesters, we obviously did not deserve to be shot, but the fact that we were alone and we were targeted is the story.
I knew that it was a false narrative again that Portland Police was actually trying to push. And it's a dangerous narrative also, you know, it's one that, you know, the right-wing conservatives actually take, and they also twist it to make it seem like, you know, anybody out doing any type of marches or events are doing the wrong thing. It puts my life at risk, you know. Anytime I speak out or I identify myself as an activist or a leader or organizer, I put myself at risk, because then you can have certain different people that follow right-wing influencers on social media. You can have those type of people that will be putting your picture out or putting your information out, you know, so it not only puts me at risk, it puts my family at risk too.
You're doing Corky now for the same march.
I still do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I cork as much as I can.
And did you have some fear or trepidation about starting to do that again?
No. Mm-mm.
Hank, pull up tighter so she'll follow you. I'm sorry, no, I get it that it's annoying. There's a bunch of teenagers right there, like, I mean, we can't. I know, but like, are you gonna run the kids over? I really would like to. I'm really sorry, but you can't today. What are you eating? Say hi to Doug. I'm streaming with Doug. Do you want to carry it so she can watch? Yeah. Doug, do you see this? I let a teenager cork and the fucking car is full of kids on top. I'm not gonna yell at them. Whatever. The kids are all right.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and get the lights. Just be mindful of your eyes. Bright lights are coming. We're going to go ahead and take a break. For those who have their hands raised on the virtual, we see you. We will get to the questions and comments here shortly. But right now, we're going to take a 15-minute break. So please come back at 7:15. Come back at 7:15.
Recording stopped.
if I could ask everyone to find a seat again, settle back in. Feel free to bring more food with you. And seeing some people trickling back in person, online folks, settle back into your spaces. And most of the rest of the meeting we have reserved for discussion and Q&A. And again, we have Robert Mackey, who you saw in the film, with us to kind of respond to the Q&A and also contribute to the discussion. And PCCEP members may have some thoughts to add as well as we go. So I think we can. Oh, we were not recording.
Recording in progress.
Great. All right, so we're going to get started with discussion. I'm not going to repeat everything I just said, but if we could get slides, Liz. All right, and PCCEP has been, as you heard, we've been talking about kind of the general topic of PPB crowd control and PPB and protests and these dynamics of trust and transparency for a little while now. It's been a discussion topic for a couple of months. And thinking about, you know, PCCEP's role and our space, we put together some suggested discussion questions. I think there's a lot we could talk about when it comes to this film and this topic, but just some things to keep in mind to kind of guide the discussion. But you can also feel free to ask any questions that you have. So I think I'm going to pass the mic over to Robert. And also, we know that the text was really hard to see in the video for some of you who are a little further back. And so I did want to take a second to maybe acknowledge a little bit of what might have been missed from that text.
Thanks, yeah. I mean, the film was made to be seen more up close, like on a laptop, or it was at PICA, the Institute of Contemporary Art, for Contemporary Art, on a kind of really big screen that you were close to. So having said that, I had trouble reading it from here without my glasses. So if people don't know, generally, I can just run through what the contextual information was. At the beginning of the film, it was explaining that June Knightley became involved in corking when a Black Lives Matter march went near her house, past her house in the summer of 2020, early on. And she quickly became a dedicated corker, taking care of people. And that she and other corkers and people who facilitate the protests, I think that's an important part of this that was misunderstood in a lot of the initial reporting, that it wasn't really accurate to say that protesters were attacked. Basically, the people who facilitate the protests, who were there to protect the marchers, were the first people that the attacker encountered. So it was a number of corkers who you heard from in the film, one of whom is here tonight. Also protest medics, and then the volunteer armed guard as well. So there's some explanation of that, of who's who in the film. It could be a little bit. There are a couple of people, 3 people who sat for audio interviews with me because I originally conceived of this as a written project. And then we realized that we could use the video, the raw footage of which was filmed by Deja back on her helmet camera, and had not been presented because there wasn't a trial and was never made public because obviously it's unbelievably difficult to watch for one reason, and also because there's an awareness that if you just put it out there, the people who specialize in re-editing video to make people look bad by lying about what happened would have an opportunity to do that. But when we started working with the video, I should just explain kind of, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's kind of important to understand that The technique, the people I work with, forensic architecture, motion graphics experts, they're trained architects. The person who started the practice is an architect and does a lot of work investigating Israeli human rights abuses specifically, but also all over the world. But it's based on, it's not just sort of like a animated sketch. Almost everything you see that you see as a computer animation is based both on witness testimony, the testimony of more than a dozen witnesses, not all of whom appear in the film, the police records, and this kind of process they call photogrammetry, where they take thousands of drone photographs of the area and then use that to construct the model that you see that's navigable. But also there's several other bystander videos and photographs that were used. So when you see towards the end of the film, the response where a lot of the volunteer medics, treated the people who were wounded and kept them alive, you don't see a lot of the primary visual information, but this is all based quite closely on photographs and video that were taken by other people who rushed to the scene, who were at the other end of the park for the protest and came over and saw a lot of this. So I'll just leave it there, but then the final thing, which is again, if anyone isn't familiar with the story and wants to know more about what we found out from the investigation from the public records requests that I was able to successfully get filled, the key thing really is that Ben Smith, the attacker, was detained at the scene, but also the guard who shot back gave themselves up to the police at the scene and said they were involved. The police or the authorities were not able to get a public defender right away, so that person who shot back kind of languished in the Justice Center around the corner for most of the night, and then was informed that they were being charged, put into prison garb, booked, and then with really no explanation told that some new evidence had come to light and they were being released and the charges were being dropped. It turns out that was the video that Deja had told the police she'd recorded. It was left at the scene for quite a while. There's actually, I forget now off the top of my head, but there's a good hour or more of video. The helmet was just left sitting at the scene after people were evacuated. But luckily it was recovered, and I know from my interviews with Nathan Vasquez, who was the deputy DA, worked on the case at the time and is about to be the DA, that they watched it during the night and thought that video exonerated the guard and made clear what had happened, and the guard was then released. But the guard was not given any explanation of that. And in fact, another detail that's not really, I guess, I'm not sure if it is in the small type of the film, it might be, it's in the article, is that the police were so antagonistic to the guard that when they released them, they refused to return, they took back the prison garb and refused to return their clothes. So they had to walk out in February, in the early morning, out of the Justice Center in their underwear. And they initially were not even going to give them their phone or keys or any identification or anything. They managed to get that. So I think some of that is in the captions. And the other thing I should say for anyone who's not aware, I mean, the film at the end from last year shows scenes of several of the people who were involved corking again at a climate march, a teen climate strike. And one of the things they were doing was they were live streaming for Deg, who was so grievously injured that she was rendered a quadriplegic. And they would take their phone and live stream as they corked so that Deg could participate virtually. And since then, Deg exercised their right to end her life last summer in July. So that is not in the film, but that's obviously important contextual information that the attacker took two people's lives, and obviously, forever altered many other people's lives. Okay, sorry, that's a lot, but I just did want to make sure that was clear that I didn't really talk about the method, but this is, it's based on witness testimony, which in an earlier era was really all the court cases and things were based on, but it's quite precise and scientific, the presentation that you see. Okay.
Thank you for providing that additional information. Right now, we're going to open up the floor for questions. Robert, if the questions are directed towards you or you feel like you might have ability to respond to what was said, that little button right there, you have a mic there, so you'll be able to respond there. So I'm going to open it up to here, and then we see you virtually, see the virtual hands, and then we'll go virtual next. Odelia?
Thank you. I think over the past few months, a lot of conversations we've been having and hearing in PCCEP is that a concern of the community that the police people differently based on ideology. And I think the part in the film of like, by the way, this is an anti-police protest, this is an anti-police protest. I was just curious if you could share your thoughts on how that impacted how the police chose to show up that evening and their response.
Yeah, that was, I was fortunate enough to be able to get, I said that the police wouldn't talk to me, they also wouldn't respond to the public records request. There's a technical reason that they were able to do that, I think, that there was some small part of the investigation of what happened that night that remained open. It didn't seem that they were pursuing it or doing anything about it, but it gave them what they think of as blanket privilege to not reveal anything. Fortunately, the emergency service office, the people who dispatch emergency service, just met the request. And the request included the full audio of the first responders talking to each other, which included the police. So we know that, yeah. And as we were doing the interviews for the film, that was the first time that the people who were the victims of the shooting had heard that that had been said. They felt that the police treated them with suspicion, that treated them more like suspects. And I think you can see in one part, Allie, who is in the Bronco, she said, and it does, again, for the purposes of making a film, you can't share everything, but in her interview, she was very clear that the police treated her like a suspect, not like a victim. And she'd been shot 4 times and was covered in blood in her car. So they were asking her questions about the protest and where things were. And so she felt that hostility, certainly. But yeah, it's definitely interesting that someone thought that very important contextual information for police responding to the scene was to tell them that there was a protest nearby, and of obviously their characterization of a Black Lives Matter protest as an anti-police protest, you would imagine that that influenced the way people think about it. So yeah, it seems quite meaningful, and it's again something I would say, I'm a journalist, but I haven't done a lot of work with public records requests before. I think people should really be aware that the public is entitled to that information, and that if you push enough, you might find an open door even where you didn't realize it was there. And so that's something that we were never gonna find out. It's just lucky eventually that they shared that.
Next, I see a hand from Dr. Silver. Is Dr. Silver still available? Dr. Silver, if you still have a comment or a question, please go ahead and unmute yourself. You'll be able to at this point. Okay, so as we wait for Dr. Silver, we'll go ahead and go to Dan.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dan.
Oh, thank you. Hi, this is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of a group called Portland Cop Watch, and if there are any PPB members there, I'd like to hear an answer to my question from them, but I'd like to hear the filmmaker's response to this comment as well. We're a group called Portland Cop Watch, and we exist to hold police accountable. But one of the first things we instruct new cop watchers is that when you come up on a scene, you don't assume who's right and who's wrong. Why are the police not trained that way? And with the way the police acted on the night of the shooting and afterward, how do they expect the community to trust them?
So we'll go to, if there's a PPB member who would like to speak to that, we'll go ahead and allow you to. If not, we'll go ahead and turn to you, Robert. Okay. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Dan. Obviously, that really is a question for the police. But I think it's, people who monitor what's going on as you do, I think it's obviously very key to accountability to just raise these questions. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I can't share much more than that.
Yeah. Dr. Silver, we see that you are on screen. Do you have a question or comment you'd like to put into the space? All right. So we're going to come back to the room, and I see 1, 2, 3 hands. So 1, 2, 3.
Is it okay if I stand up?
You may.
Yeah. I'm going to stand up and make sure that y'all can hear me and try to understand where I'm coming from. As a corker that was there with T-Rex and Dog, we were rear corkers together for some time, and T-Rex was actually my teacher when I first started corking, and the three of us have become very close. I am going to share a little bit of lived experience to lead up to the question I'm going to ask Robert, but this incident was my 24th gun violence incident. I was born and raised in the hood, and I have a lot of lived experience around police excessive and deadly force, and I can go on and on about that. That led me to be and asked to be on the Police Accountability Commission as well. But so I always had this mistrust of getting too close to people. But T-Rex and Dag were definitely trying to get me to be their BFF. And so to lose both of them, yeah. Anyway, so what I'm going to share is going to be from my lived experience as a woman of color. Okay, this is a different lens than how it's portrayed on here. This is good information. Yeah, I'm glad people get to know what corking's all about, but it's a lot more. And so I had to write some things down so I don't forget. So my indigenous name is Pulaski Still, descendant of many tribes on this land, on our land, where we were nearly annihilated due to the racist settler colonialism right here where we are meeting tonight. Since there wasn't a land acknowledgement, it's important that I say this. So racial justice first requires some radical truth here, which is usually something they forbid us from sharing. Radical truth with emotions, lived experience. They're kind of like check-off boxes that they really don't want to hear. As has been my experience on a Police Accountability Commission. Racial justice first requires some radical truth. The event of February 19th in this documentary, in reality, should be entirely about racist, systemic white supremacy to its core. Yet, in its attempt to focus on police lack of accountability, it kind of skimmed that surface and centered our white comrades. I was left feeling like I was an afterthought. And as well as all the black attendees of the protests, like even though they weren't witnesses and they weren't right there like I was, they are devastated. They're still struggling with the grief, especially our black folks who are grieving deeply because T-Rex and Dag
were murdered for Black Lives Matter, right? Defending us, standing up for us, fighting for us, and ultimately paid the ultimate price for us. I don't want to downplay, the courage of my white comrades, the humanitarian actions of those who were there and who cork. Because they know the injustice and the racist culture of America. And especially T and Deg, they totally understood my kind of radical truth that I would share with them. However, what was also lacking was the fact that this was an ongoing protest and march since years before 2020, uprising for police accountability by Letha, black mother of Patrick Kimmons, who was shot 9 times in the back with no accountability, and with several who were there and continue to struggle. Oh, I already shared that. I am grateful and a survivor. I have some guilt around surviving this because I dodged a bullet when I ducked behind my truck, which was next to T-Rex's truck. And I had walked right behind her when she got out of the truck, and I was going, because I heard what he was saying, some horrific things. So I was going to my truck to get my radio to call for security. As soon as I hit my truck, I heard the gunfire, and I just ducked behind my truck. I've been in those situations multiple times in my lifetime. And so I knew what to do, and I knew what not to do. And this is leading up to a question on us. Just focusing on the aftermath of this and what the police get away with, there needs to be interviews of those disproportionately target of police deadly violence. And yes, how their fiction in their police reporting is believed over those of us who know the truth about the deliberate interference of justice and obstruction of any police accountability. To bring about any actual justice, dismantling systemic institutional racist white supremacy needs to be a preventative approach, because just documenting the aftermath alone won't result in change or racial justice or cop accountability. Black folks continue to be executed by cop to this day. George Floyd and Patrick Kimmons are not isolated incidences, nor are they the actions of a few bad apples. It is a rotten systemic racist white supremacy, and this radical truth needs to be prioritized in any book, documentary, movie when it comes to fighting for real racial justice, liberation, equity, and a safe anti-racist place to live and thrive. So my question, Robert, love you. There will never be trust, and I'm answering all those questions they had up there with it. There will never be trust until systemic racist white supremacy is addressed. Do you have any plans to center Black Lives Matters with the, I can't read my own writing, but basically back to what they were in the streets for all around the world in 2020 for police accountability, because this doesn't just happen here in America. This is around the world, and nobody wants to address the systemic part of this. So help us out here, Robert.
Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's much better if you talk than I do, but yeah, I totally appreciate what you're saying, and I do hope, this is dependent on some other factors, but I do hope to get to write something longer that, I mean, there's so much more important aspects of what happened and what the context than I was able to get. I mean, this is supposed to be a 15-minute film, and it's 37 minutes. It's like a really long short film. But yeah, it's specifically about what it's about, and it's true that it all happened in a context that it would be better if that was addressed, absolutely. So we did our best with this, but I hope to do better with something more comprehensive, and I really appreciate your thoughts and your being willing to share your lived experience. It's really extremely important. Thanks.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and continue to take some questions. Thank you again for your groundedness and framing, and we really appreciate your statement. Are there any virtual folks who would like to speak? All right. Yeah. Let's go ahead. Matt Levine.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to have my voice heard. Recognizing how little my BIPOC friends, comrades, and community members have had their voices heard, I'm working on never taking it for granted to have mine heard. So my question for you, Robert, and PCCEP members is going to be critical, but I hope not at all combative. So I want to give a little context for it in the hopes that it's received in the spirit it's intended. My name is Matt Levine. I identify racially as white and ethnically as Ukrainian and Irish. I'm a racial justice activist, scholar, and facilitator. My closest friend in the world is the courageous and brilliant Indigenous woman, E. Still, that we just heard from live and in the documentary. I corked and marched with T-Rex and Deg. I've committed my life to this work partly because of needing to work on healing the great racial harm I've caused as a white man in this white supremacist settler colonial world. And one of the things I do in this work is support other white folks on recognizing the ways in which we cause such harm independent of our intentions. So please be clear, I know that you had good intentions in creating this documentary, and I also think there are unbelievably important things it accomplishes. That said, I, like E. Still, also think it's problematic. In particular, I think it's dangerous in how much it ignores how central white supremacy is in understanding everything about the horrific murders of T-Rex and Deg. This was a protest led by an amazing Black woman standing up for the life of her Black son and another Black man who had been recently murdered. The hatred motivated the murder was racial. The police response built on racial stereotypes around being anti-police. The media response around homeowner can't be understood without understanding how homeownership has been racialized in this country. How many people at this Black Lives Matter protest were white can't be understood without understanding the horrifically anti-Black history of Portland and Oregon, a state founded on Black exclusion laws and a city whose police force was once majority Ku Klux Klan members. And to be clear, I don't think you are alone in insufficiently racializing this event. I've also publicly written and talked about OPB doing the same thing. So with all of that context, my question for you, Robert, is how have you considered your own whiteness in relation to discussing and publicizing these events? And for the folks on PCCEP, how are you working on healing the unending amount of white supremacist racial harm that PPB, PPA, and the city of Portland have caused? Again, thank you very much for being willing to hear my voice.
Thank you, Matt. Robert?
Thanks. Thanks, Matt, for sharing that. I'm afraid I don't have a very good answer for you. I'm not really going to be able to speak to things that we didn't work on in the film. As I said, the film itself is a short look at what happened. It was an attempt to correct the police misinformation. That was the focus, really. And also to let people who were there share their own witness testimony and try to help illustrate it. But I do think what you say is very valuable, and I think that it's important that it be part of the discussion. I think that, I guess the only thing I can say is that the film isn't intended to be comprehensive. It's not a comprehensive statement of the whole history of the event, the whole history of Portland or the United States, or the racial backdrop to everything. I think that the fact that it was a racial justice protest is incredibly important. And it obviously was important to the person who attacked and killed related to these issues. But yeah, I can't say, I can't offer a really satisfying answer based on my own ethnic background. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about that, but I don't really have much I can add to that. My role, I'm a reporter. I report. I try to do it with empathy and with the input from people who are affected by things, but I'm not really personally, I'm not really centering my own reflections on these issues, but I appreciate that they're very important, and I think that it's important that you share them. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a quick comment to kind of bring it back to the PCCEP space, and I appreciate the question to PCCEP, and I think someone maybe wants to respond to that. I think this film and these issues do touch on so many things. I just briefly, if I could speak to a little bit of why PCCEP, with what they're charged with and the things they look at, was interested in this film and this topic, was really, the core of it really was that police response, the communications during and after. Again, acknowledging this touches on so many things, like all of the work that PCCEP does, but to maybe narrow it a little bit. And kind of, I think what PCCEP is really interested in exploring and potentially hearing more about, if people have thoughts, is what impact did that have? The record still not being corrected, there being evidence between the discrepancies between the DA's understanding and the PPB's understanding of the events. What impact did that have on the community? What opportunities are there moving forward to improve or rebuild or repair or whatever it may be? That really kind of narrowing in on that issue, understanding there are so many covered in this film, is just, what PCCEP, I think, had in mind when bringing this to the space. And I think Devontae's hand was up.
Thank you, Dory. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Robert, for putting this film together, because I myself was not extremely familiar with some of the details associated with what happened that night, and really about everything that corking entailed. And of course, I'm not saying that to say that this film has made me an expert in understanding what corking consists of and all the things that the corkers have to experience and deal with, putting their lives on the line to do what they do. But it definitely gave me a better perspective of the issue and some of the challenges that can be associated with that. So thank you so much, because it was extremely informative for me. And I think that there is a lot of details because of how the incident has been misconstrued or the narrative has been altered by PPB. There's a lot of information that people who aren't familiar or who weren't there or who don't know the individuals personally who experienced that, we wouldn't know a lot of the things that we now are aware of if it wasn't for the film. So I think that maybe was part of the focus, if I'm not mistaken, is just to get the awareness out there and allow those people to tell their stories. And so it was very powerful in that regard. I guess a question that I do have, and I am myself a black male, father to 3, black boys. So I do understand that perspective, but I think that for me, the focal point is a question that I would have for you, Robert, would be when you were kind of met with that resistance and that reluctance from PPB to sit down with you and have an interview with you, or even just discuss why that narrative has not been corrected, even to this day. Was there any additional information that they gave you, or are there any ideas that you might have that could maybe help to get a different result in the future should another situation like this arise, God forbid? But is there anything that you think that could have been done to possibly get them to agree to change that narrative? That would be my biggest question, because I think that really is speaking to a lot to transparency. And as was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that's kind of what we've been talking about in PCEP or PCCEP for the last couple of months, because I think that transparency is really the center of a lot of the issues that we end up facing when we see these issues come up time and time again. It's the divide that exists between PPB and the BIPOC community, people of color, right? There's a distrust there, right? And so PPB refusing to be transparent does not help to build that trust. If anything, it damages the trust more than it already is damaged, right? So I was wondering if you could speak to that at all.
Thanks very much. That's very good to hear that was, if it's at all useful, that's really good. Yeah, I could share with you that I guess to start with in a more general way, I do think that there may be some avenues for accountability, and I talked about this with some of the people on the PCEP board, that there's a kind of odd aspect to this story that the person who, the prosecutor in the case, Nathan Vasquez, is about to be the DA, but was elected against the person who was presented as a reformer DA. So you would expect, and with the support of the police union. What I was trying to find out, he agreed to talk to me. He played, because I was with the person who recorded the video, he agreed to play for us the first police interview with Ben Smith. They wouldn't turn that over. I don't have a copy of it, but I listened to the whole thing. And he prosecuted Ben Smith. So in some ways, this person who would seem to be antagonistic to protest and to racial justice issues, was responsible. But what I can tell you from the course of trying to get this information that's kind of interesting and a bit strange is that the police wouldn't give me anything. He shared much more with me. But he acted as if he had really no say over the police, which is kind of weird to me. I don't understand really. I mean, he was able to basically say, well, we're not going to charge the person who shot back. It was really up to him, the prosecutor. But the interaction between the police and the prosecutor was really, it was kind of weird that he didn't seem to feel like he had to take responsibility or push them to do anything, that they had their own independent power. But in the course of getting some public records information, his office turned over, because I asked a lot about the statement and why the statement wasn't corrected, they turned over, and I think they're just trying to stay within the law. They had to give me something, so they gave me email traffic between the police and his office. When the police did later issue a statement, like a year later, they put out a response to June's widow's statement when it was clear that Ben Smith was going to be found guilty, was confessing eventually. And she said the police put out this false story and we don't understand why, and why aren't they being held accountable? So they felt like, they said in their email to the prosecutor, well, we were told we have to respond to this. So sort of what should we say? And we'll share a draft of the statement with you. So they did put out a statement later, a year later, not on their own website, but on the city's website. And it basically says it was fine. It basically says, it was very confusing. We didn't know what was going on. We worked really hard, and we did a great job. And that was their kind of answer to like criticism that their statement was wrong. It's not hard for them. They could go back and correct the statement. It's on the website right now. It says, and they did correct, I should point out, they did correct homeowner because he was a renter. So they changed that. But obviously it has a lot, and as I think Matt was saying, the word homeowner has a lot of resonance and importance in history here. So they felt like they could change that, but they never changed this idea that the confrontation was basically started by what they called armed protesters. So, you know, it's extremely unsatisfying. It's really infuriating. But I can also tell you the other thing, and I'm not sure how helpful this is, but when I pressed them to let me talk to the then commissioner, the then chief of police, Chuck Lovell, the press person refused and just said, no, we can't do that. He can't do that. And then in the course of a back and forth of the emails, it became clear to me that he didn't ask Chuck Lovell if he would talk to me. He just said no on his behalf. And then I started to realize, well, this is someone who worked on the statement. That's who I'm being forced to deal with, as a police officer who thinks it's all totally fine. And I did slightly, I'll admit that I slightly lost my cool. We had a kind of angry exchange over it. That didn't work. That didn't help to change the situation. You know, what does help, I guess, it has to be, you know, some sort of public official really putting pressure on them, which so far the public officials who are in charge of the police have not done. And, you know, I don't know who's out there who might do that. Obviously, the one person who has a lot of signs around who's running for mayor, one of the candidates recently had like a friendly exchange with Andy No, the right-wing blogger, on Twitter. And Andy knows something that's in the article, but it's not in the film, is that Ben Smith, the attacker, was a follower of Andy No's on YouTube. And within the week, I think 5 days before the shooting, Andy No had posted video about this exact march and was militating against it and saying that the people who were armed guards for the protest were terrorists and attackers. And the attacker, Ben Smith, 5 days later, whether he watched the video or not, I don't know, I couldn't prove that, but he did follow his channel, used the word terrorist when he approached them. So I would think that you need officials who aren't going to cozy up to the people who are inciting this kind of violence. That's the best, maybe. That's the best we can do now, but hopefully there's someone who will actually take a stand and try to exert, you know, the power of elected officials should have over the police, obviously.
Yeah, I got some more questions in the back. Say again? Yes, you're going to respond to Matt? Okay, and then we'll come to the back and we'll come up here. So.
Hi, my name is Odelia. I'm a PCCEP member, and I just wanted to respond to your question, Matt. I think, like, really appreciate the accountability and the accountability we're receiving in this room. I think that's always important. And I think as an advisory board, we have a lot of power in some ways. Like, we can have conversations in which, like, I as just a community member could not have, because we have that power from the settlement agreement. But there's also a lot of things that we can't do and that aren't in the settlement agreement. And I think, like, my personal opinion is that advisory bodies like ours, which are made up of volunteers, it's really, really hard to get things done with people who are volunteering their time. And we've seen that with other advisory bodies as well, that it's kind of almost like a backwards process in many ways. But I think, like, we can always do more to kind of undergird our work in white supremacy. And then also at the same time, that's not what we're tasked with by the settlement agreement. And so that's a line that we navigate as PCCEP members, and it's something, like, we continue to have conversations about. But I think I just wanted to address kind of your question and say that, like, totally, like, and I think that's kind of a part of the nature of advisory bodies in general, is that, like, we're not being tasked to end white supremacy. We're being tasked to follow the settlement agreement and do X, Y, and Z, which is just something to think about. Yeah.
Thank you, Cordelia.
Thank you. Question for Robert. You were just mentioning how you were astonished, maybe I used the wrong word, when you were talking to the Nathan Vasquez about his inability to push back against the police narrative. I wasn't astonished to hear that. Do you believe that there are other municipalities where district attorneys have more control, communication, collaboration with their police bureaus? Is Portland unusual?
Yeah, sorry, I should say that I'm not an expert in this field, so I mean, sometimes, occasionally, it's good to not know about a subject when you blunder into it, because then you try to understand just what an ordinary person would try to understand. So yeah, I just was surprised. I was surprised that they felt the need to consult about the statement, but there was no idea that he could influence what they did. And also, I should say, I mean, another aspect of this, and again, there's a lot of things that aren't in either the film or the article I wrote, but that are important. One of the detectives investigating the case, the lead person, Scott Broughton, at the time that this was going on, it was well known that he had dragged his feet on prosecuting Sean Killier's killing as well. So the mistrust from the community for the people, not just the people who arrived at the scene immediately, but the people who were then investigating it, is super understandable. But, you know, from the other side, like they turned down my request to talk to him, to talk to anybody in the police. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't mean to be naive about it, but it does seem like there has to be someone in the chain of elected officials, and Nathan Vasquez has now been elected, who the public can pressure to actually take some kind of control or have some input besides just doing whatever the police want, it seems like.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a couple more questions. Folks who are virtually, please, if you have questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand virtually. We'll go ahead and take the next question here. We're going to go ahead and send our community members. So, okay.
I wanted to ask you, with the false narrative, and it seems kind of like the struggle over the cultural meta narrative, if you've found any sort of antagonism with the police just because you're a journalist, and if you can kind of speak to, because we've had some other people point out that maybe other aspects of the narrative deserve some focus as well. Just the idea of narratives being it seems to be a political tool. Can you speak to perhaps the kind of connection between the politics of this story with reporting and trying to just tell the truth, as the truth being also a political tool?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's a lot in what you're asking about. I would say just the simplest part of the question is that the police, since they didn't talk to me, I don't know if they're particularly hostile to me or to journalism in general. I do think, I mean, something that was interesting to me, and I should point out, I also started my journalistic career, I kind of backed into journalism as a fact checker. I spent 5 years fact checking magazine articles. So I just have, it just bugs me when things that are not true get out there. But you know, it's also really interesting, and it's only in a few snippets in the film, but when you go back and look at the reporting on this incident, this attack, this deadly, it's a terrorist attack, it's a domestic terrorist attack. It was never framed that way. And the police, the part of all of those reports that really interested me from a journalistic background that I have is where there's a statement of fact, what appears to be fact, and then comma, police say. And you hear that in all the local TV reports. But you see it, I used to work I was fact checking at the New York Times. I used to work at the New York Times. The initial New York Times story has the quote from the police and says, police say. And it was never, you know, these things are considered, they're breaking news, they're things that happen, other things happen. People don't have time or energy to come back to them or interest. And so then that just stays there. You know, I can tell you as a fact checker, you go through like all of the articles about something, someone writes later about something, you go through all the contemporary news reports, you try to make sure that you're getting the facts right. And if things aren't corrected, that becomes history, you know? And so obviously the people who were there were immediately telling the truth about what happened. But, you know, essentially if the person who recorded it on video hadn't recorded the video, I have no idea what would have happened to the armed guard who shot back. And I mean, the person who shot back told me, he elected to, you know, do the audio interview, but didn't want to be on camera, that when they pulled the trigger, they just assumed they were going to spend the rest of their lives in jail. They thought it was right what they were doing. They knew it was legal, but they had no expectation when they turned themselves in that they weren't going to just go to jail. So, you know, that's a question of, it's an unusual aspect. A lot of social media has become just horrible. It's abused so much, but this is a moment where the fact that someone who is a participant made their own media of what was happening, who witnessed it in media in this way, and then also tweeted about it in the aftermath. That's how I heard about it. So I knew, well, I actually reported on it for a website called The Intercept a couple of days after the event happened. And wouldn't have been, there would have been no ripple in the, you know, police story just gets out and it's gone and it's everywhere. I mean, to me, the thing that's still completely outrageous, and I don't understand how they don't feel the need to correct it in some way or address it, is that they knew, the police knew, the detectives watched the video with the prosecutor, and they knew that it was an unprovoked attack, and that meant that they had to release the person who shot back. Why would they have done that if they didn't know that? And the police statement came out, I don't know, exactly 6-8 hours later, after the person was released. Police statement that said it was a confrontation provoked by armed protesters did not come out before the video was seen. It came out after the video was seen. And what can you say about that? And you know, I have the video where you see Chuck Lovell, who was the police chief at the time, on TV. That's 2 or 3 days later on TV saying the same thing. And I know also, you know, it's something that isn't in here, but I had a source who knows firsthand what Chuck Lovell told the city council staff, you know, more than 24 hours after the incident, and just repeated that line and said, essentially, and I won't say if it was a quote or not, but essentially said, well, that's what happens when you bring guns to a protest. So, I mean, you know, this is me interpreting now, but I know that was said, that the police wanted to use this to push back against the idea that protesters who had been harassed and threatened with guns could defend themselves with guns. So I think that it looks very, I won't say for sure, but it looks very like that was an intentional strategy by them to do that. But yeah, so obviously what you're saying is extremely important. The narrative that gets out there, the way it's shaped, you know. Thanks.
So just a quick note here, we have maybe 10 to 15 minutes more time for discussion. And I want to put it out there, if we're feeling like it's possible. So what PCCEP does with these conversations, we like to kind of take inventory of what we hear and then, you know, see how we can move forward or bring it into kind of it might be a recommendation, it might be more engagement, it might be, you know, it can look like a lot of things, but in sort of a forward-looking way, thinking about what we've heard so far, and it might be somewhat obvious in this circumstance, but are there things that you would like to see done differently? Are there ways that the PPB and the city could improve upon what they've done in the past? Are there specific steps they could take to repair this ongoing situation? So if we're feeling like it's possible to kind of think through those sorts of questions in the remaining time for comments and questions, I would love to kind of put that out there just to give PCCEP something a little more material to work with as they're thinking about this in future meetings. And PCCEP members too can also comment. And I think we're going to prioritize folks we haven't heard from first. So
I want to make sure that before I speak, other folks would probably have more, especially people that were at Louisville.
sure, and let's just make sure, because I want to maximize the amount of that sort of forward-looking input we get, so let's just keep comments brief if possible.
Very much so. So you heard from my friend Matt Levine. He is a facilitator, equity, inclusivity, anti-racist, not just a facilitator, that's his lifetime career, but he's also works for a university and teaches in the same vein, as well as an author, etc. So he travels all over the United States and even Canada, giving anti-racist, equity, inclusivity trainings for groups like yours. And I think and these are long-term, and I know y'all are just volunteers and short-term, but nothing's gonna change until you all change, individually and as groups, with this type of training. You're gonna continue to use the same thinking until you get to really take an internal inventory of your own whiteness. And so that is doable. You know, if you can't do it as a group at PCCEP, do it individually. Yeah.
All right, so at 8:15, we're going to shift from the Q&A session and we're going to move into open comment. And just a reminder, the open comment section is an opportunity for community folks to speak about or ask questions or share comments about any of the work that PCCEP is doing, as well as the topic today. So just note that 8:15, we're going to go ahead and make that shift, and we'll take as many comments in this Q&A portion as possible right now. Let's go ahead. I saw a number of hands. Yeah, okay.
My question is kind of towards the PCCEP members, is watching the film, potentially reading Robert's article in advance, like, what are the things that we can ask of Portland Police Bureau? I think there's tangible things that are like, they should have corrected the story. Number one, the story should have never come out. But can that be corrected? Can there be an apology issued, not only to the people present at Normandale, the survivors, but to the community at large, because of that continuous impact of the narrative coming from the police bureau, coming from the mayor's office, who's also in the film and being identified as somebody who potentially contributed to the culture of fear and violence that led to that. That's a part of the long history of, you know, white supremacist power, being with a mayor who has that power to not change the status quo. But can there be a request to make an apology? And also to wonder, like, has there been any sort of internal investigation by the police bureau? Do they continue to see this as a problem? Has there been any change in the public information officer's practices and policies? And, you know, I do think that the public information officer deserves scrutiny, but at the same time, as Robert called out, like, Chief Lavelle repeated these statements, and so there's also pressure, like, what has been done to review Portland Police Bureau's policies of the chief's responsibility and what accountability has been done there. Has there been any sort of internal review? And not that that's within PCCEP's responsibility to do the internal review, but to ask, like, when you see this, are we okay with this continuing? What has been done so we can have information? Is it possible for us to get the records or the transparency of here's what was done, here's what's different, here's what's changed, so we can even know? How do we advocate for change if we don't know anything from the police that they even think it should be changed in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Robert, do you want to say anything, or we'll just go ahead and move forward? Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take a couple PCEP members' questions, and then I'm going to go back to the community members. So, Ashley, do you want to go ahead and?
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I just want to really make a quick comment. Much love to the Corkers. Thank you so much for all you guys do in our community. I've protested many times, taken my family. I feel safe. I've never felt community the way I have on a protest. And I just want to represent and just say thank you to those that have taken that role, because we know you're putting yourself at risk, and you're doing it so that we can have our constitutional right to be on the streets together. So thank you. To answer your question, Jake, and also to kind of touch on Matt's question to PCEP. I think, again, this is just a space for us to create to help us puzzle what we can do and say. When after the video and we had our break, I asked Adelia, I was like, did we do the right thing? I mean, did we bring more trauma into this space? And I think we're really cognizant about that with PCEP and our meetings, because we can trauma dump, and then what, right? And then where do these voices go? Where do these questions go? So I think we're gonna really take that. We're not gonna take that for granted, the time and space that we've created tonight. And so what does that look like? Could it be a recommendation, which is the space where PCEP has a big piece of influence, where we can get response back? Looking ahead with the change in government, right? We're gonna have to build a new relationship with the mayor and the council, and so that's kind of on our mind too, and thinking about how the council and the mayor utilizes PCEP for that bridge between community, and how we break down those barriers of trust and transparency. And yeah, we definitely don't have all the answers, but we're really dedicated to creating as much opportunity and space to help puzzle what that could look like. And so, yeah, Matt, to your question, I think what can PCEP do? I think Adelia did a really good job of explaining. It's like it's a relationship building that we're doing with the city and the community, and we're leaning more into building a relationship with PPB so that we can ask harder questions. And I know that's maybe not an answer anybody wants to hear. Like, maybe we need to be more forceful, and we can take that input. But this is a dialogue we're trying to create so it can be sustainable change, and it's incremental, and it's like pulling threads from a sweater. So that would be my answer, just sort of thinking about that. And then I just have one more question for Robert. What would you have asked PPB if you had gotten, an interview with somebody who had given you some input on what happened?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I guess my sort of thinking was just to start at the factual level and try to build up from like what happened, how did this happen, would they just decided to lie? Like what, like what happened actually? Who wrote this statement? Why did they write it? The statement actually says it was the result of their preliminary investigation. So what was that? And the statement includes a lot of other really offensive things that are not, they're kind of a matter of opinion, but they're also not true, which is, it says like people were not cooperative and left without giving a statement. I mean, there were people there for hours who were just pushed outside the tape. And, there was a lot of other things that could be said, could be asked. Yeah, I mean, I would think that's a very good question, whether it might be really fair to ask, and unfortunately, obviously, it could be for so many other cases, and this just happens to be this one that we have this video evidence of, which makes it glaringly obvious, but it seems like there should be some sort of internal investigation of what the hell happened here, It's not satisfying at all to anybody in the community that they can trust the police now to tell the truth. I mean, it's a pretty core function to tell the truth to the public, right? So I feel like they still got off the hook, it's not over yet, hopefully. But so far, they feel like they let themselves off the hook. And yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and continue to take more questions until 8:25, and then at that time we'll move to public comment. We're still taking questions or comments from those who have not been heard just yet. So I want to take a PCCEP member right now. I'm going to go back to the public, and then I'm going to come back to PCCEP members. Tia?
Thanks. Sorry, I wanted to jump in right when the video was over because my question was, did the truth ever become public? But then I heard you say it didn't, and other comments saying it didn't seem to ever, the truth never came out. It's super frustrating to me. Like, how can we work on the truth? And is that something we can work on? Also, right before I came here, I had the 5 o'clock news on, and our mayor just was saying that they were preparing for civil unrest. The police are going to be working 12-hour-long days on this election week, and will be keeping everyone safe. The bottom line is it's all about safety, and we're going to be keeping everybody safe. And I haven't been part of the team where we're working on the rapid response team and the new crowd control team, and I'm wondering, it would be so nice for them to hear what the line in the film, that the police aren't there to help. Only the police came, and there was no EMT. And I feel like that would be a super important piece for the new crowd control. How could they ever see pieces of that could help them with that in the training? Were the things I was thinking. And I don't think it's ever too late, because I believe that we're still working and waiting on findings of the 2020 protest by an independent monitor that I know that we've been, I think, waiting for the last few years. And so hope things do move slowly, and I feel like we could still work on it. Those are my thoughts. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tia. We'll go back here. Another question, comment?
Yeah, my name's John. I'm going to try not to talk too much because I do have a question. But through you had mentioned potential motives from Ben Smith and how he was a follower of Andy No. And then the week leading up to that, Andy was talking a lot about the event, calling the group a terrorist, and then Ben showing up and being like, "You guys are terrorists," and then shooting people. So there was some community efforts to identify the shooter before the Portland police were able to, and the community, through the community's help, we used my social media to publish that information, and we found a bunch of information showing the political motivation. Anyway, so I was able to go to the presser that happened a couple days later. I don't know how many days, multiple days later. And of course, the media, the local media, legacy media, none of them were asking the hard questions. That's just the norm. And so I was able to ask some of the hard questions, which is the ones we've been talking about, is like, why'd you call him a homeowner? Why are you saying they were saying there's no political affiliation, which is very misleading. It's like, yeah, maybe the guy's not a Proud Boy, but it was politically motivated, and they were leaving that out. And of course, the police didn't answer the question. They avoided the question. And I'm saying that to say that then Andy No was emailing the mayor's staff to attempt to get me excluded from pressers. And the media person was very sympathetic and to Andy. And so I think that, Wheeler already has that level of culpability around the statements you've made, but also there are many of us that believe like this guy was outraged because of the propaganda that Andy was putting out, and then Wheeler is being sympathetic to Andy. So there's that. There was something else that I was going to say, but the question that I wanted to get to, there was something that I was going to connect these two things. But you had mentioned about public records request. Oh, that's what it was. So the police on multiple occasions are surrounding situations where there's a medical emergency at a protest and there being a lack of response. What the police have said on multiple occasions is that they are responsible for clearing a scene, and they're the ones that say, okay, paramedics or firefighters, you can go in now. So often when there's somebody is not, their medical emergency is not addressed, it's because the police aren't letting them in, whether they should or should not be doing that. And then often the police will then blame protesters for the lack of medical attention. So that's something that I was thinking about, is like only police on scene. That likely was very intentional. They chose to not let, likely chose to not let paramedics and fire in. And then, so all of this, there's still unanswered questions, and public records are one of those ways that we get questions answered. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall for sure, but I'm 99% sure that I put in a public records request after the conviction and sentencing of Ben Smith, and they still denied releasing public records. And so those that don't know, that the main reason why they won't release certain public records is almost always because there's an open investigation. They'll say, it's an open investigation, we can't release information because it could hinder the investigation. So they're refusing to release records even after the person has been convicted. So I heard you mention, this is the question, I heard you mention something about them releasing a little bit more. Did I hear right that they released something after Ben Smith was sentenced?
Yeah, not the police. What I got was I got the other side of the email traffic from the prosecutor's office.
And you still haven't got other public records?
I got the public records that the audio you hear in I got full cooperation apparently from the emergency response office. Mm-hmm. Basically, I got all of the audio for like 2 hours from the very beginning, the first 911 call all the way through, and the computer-assisted dispatch records, which is this incredibly complicated printout, and it's all this jargon, but you can figure out a lot from it, actually.
But no police reports?
No.
And nothing else, just the audio? So
yeah.
That's
but I mean, you know the time. The one thing you do know from the emergency responses, because the police, you can tell where they were at what moment and when they said certain things. You have to put all this stuff together.
Yeah.
The audio came as a dump of one audio file. It wasn't time coded. But if you work with the records from the computer of which officer was where, you can sort of figure it out.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is figured out. I mean, I would say the one thing that I went into it trying to figure out was whether the police, they absolutely, you can see them standing around casually and saying to people who are saying we need medics, oh, we have to secure the scene. You can hear, it's in the mix of the audio, it's hard to hear, but it's there, that they're saying they have to secure the scene, but they seem to be standing around with, not feeling there's any threat to them. So that seems like it's slow. But I would say when you piece together where the ambulances were, they staged outside the park, because they probably could have gotten there before the police went into the park, but because the report was that someone had shot back and they didn't know where that person was, because the person who made the 911 call didn't even know what was going on, the police said we have to go in before the paramedics. But when you put it together, it's a matter of a couple of minutes. It's not like they waited half an hour. I mean, it could seem like that, and those minutes could have been extremely important to Deg's injuries. We don't know. So it's definitely something, that's where, I mean, a real internal investigation of what happened with you have to be really close to the screen, but there is time code, because you could figure out from the video too, someone else recorded stuff afterwards and their Apple phone gave us exactly to the second time code of something happening in the aftermath, and you can match it up with Deja's video, and then you can figure out exactly to the second when the shooting happened. So there should be a full report from the police saying, this is what happened, this is when we got there, this is how long it took to let in the paramedics. That would be a really good thing that the police could do. They have the power to do that, and obviously they have their own reports, so they could do that.
All right, this is going to be our last question for this portion. We really deeply appreciate all the community members who were able to come out, those who are also virtually, to both listen, participate, add comment and question to this space. And just know after this question, we'll open the floor for public Q&A.
So I guess my question is kind of a general question, not just to you, Robert, but really to everybody in this space. If we had somebody here from PPB, that would be great, because I feel like this would be a question that maybe they could also contribute to brainstorming on and trying to find an answer to. But I wonder if there is a way for PPB to collaborate with the Corkers in their corking activity to try to ensure that we are keeping the protesters safe, because ultimately that's the priority here, right, is making sure that the people who are out there, exercising their, constitutional rights are able to do so in a protected manner. And also, thankfully everything worked out with the armed guard getting released, but as you stated, Robert, he was ready to go to jail for the rest of his life, right? I don't think that any, protester or person who is out there, exercising their constitutional rights should have to be doing so with that thought in mind. So if there was a way for law enforcement to collaborate hand in hand with those who are corking to try and protect the people who are protesting, I wonder if there's a way that there could be something put together for that to happen. At the end of the day, we're the Committee on Community Engaged Policing, right? And so I think that is just a way, I'm just brainstorming off the top of my head, right? But to me, that screams unity, right? That screams a coming together between law enforcement and the community to try to make Portland a better and safer city. So that's just my general question to everyone is any ideas, tangible ways that we can maybe work to accomplish that?
Yeah, so we really only have a few minutes left, and it's technically open public comment, but you can just continue the conversation. If you have something you want to share that isn't related to today's agenda, we do honor that in our open public comment period, so you can feel free to express that as well.
I'll just jump in for 1 second. I would say, what's a shame is that the police are missing from the discussion of policing. It would be good if they had to send somebody, and to talk specifically about this in this case, but obviously it really would be much more useful if they were at all of these public meetings.
Yeah, sometimes for discussions like this, we get requests for, we get competing requests. They are invited. They do often attend our meetings, and so it's a little bit of a tightrope sometimes depending on the topic. But yeah, completely agree. Should we go to Dan? Dan, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, I do want to say I saw that was you still with her hand up. And I appreciate all of her comments, and we were colleagues on the Police Accountability Commission, so just want to say that. But on that note, some of this kind of difficulty might get addressed not by PCCEP, but by the new Police Oversight Board if it gets instituted properly, which we don't know until we see what City Council looks like. And for those of you who don't know, just today, Judge Simon released his response to City Council, who asked for him to reverse his decision to put off getting the nominations for the new Oversight Board until January. And he said, I'm not changing my mind. So there's that. But one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is that, and this is for you, Robert, and for the PCCP and everybody there, I've talked about this before, but now that police have body cameras, they're releasing the body camera footage before there is a grand jury investigation. They always tell us we can't release information because there's an investigation, but they're releasing the body camera footage with their own narrative attached to it, where they say things like, the police tried de-escalating. We don't show it to you on this video, but believe us, it happened. And then all you hear is the police yelling and shouting at people that they're going to shoot them. And then they shoot them. So I think this is something that you should, if you're going to make recommendations about how public information goes out, you should consider that aspect of it too, the shootings and the body camera and the narratives. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I just wanted to respond to Devontae's question with my point of view. I think that a lot of the reason that Corkers exist are because they don't want police to be the ones policing the protests, and like as community members, like they believe that they can show up and do that and be safe and keep each other safe, and they do like so much de-escalation and so much like keeping people safe. And this was an incident where that was like impossible when there was someone like a white supremacist who showed up and shot people. But I think that that doesn't make it that doesn't justify having more police at protests. I think it just asks the question of, okay, so then when I did call the police, why did they treat this like a crime scene and why didn't they help us? And like that's the problem here. And I think oftentimes when there are police at protests, there's just more harm, especially when they're at Black Lives Matter protests, right? And when they see it connected to like that anti-police movement, that those ties are being made, and the way they're showing up isn't to be always helpful, but it's to, like, sometimes we've seen them cause harm in those spaces, right? And so I think having more police and presence there is something that some protesters might want, but I don't think it's something a lot of protesters want. And that's always an option for protest organizers. They can work with the police. Some people do, right? And they get permits and that happens. But I think like it's important to think of like community members and how we can keep each other safe and all the other tools and tactics that kind of go into like what makes a community and what it means to protest, and especially if they're protesting about racial justice, right? So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Very briefly, we're gonna wrap up soon.
So as a Corker out there, predominantly corking Black Lives Matters protests for years, and not wanting a police there because, like what was said, is they're more likely to escalate. It's kind of along the same things for like my Black Indigenous grandson. I had to teach him how to stay alive when being pulled over by the cops, and we don't call the cops for fear of their excessive and deadly force. And so those of us who are corking, we want nothing to do with them there. We don't want them there because they do more harm than they do good, especially in those instances. So, and for even outside of that, for decades, we have been witness to targets of victims of and survivors of police and excessive and deadly force. And they don't want to change. They fought us tooth and nail to not be held accountable on the Police Accountability Commission when we were creating the new Community Board for Police Accountability. Tooth and nail. They want to keep doing what they do.
Can I jump in just for a second? I just wanted to point out, too, that one thing that's interesting, and obviously it's very hard to even listen to, but the 911 call was not for the police. It's very clearly for an ambulance. And the ambulance came after the police. You know, that's just the sort of order of things. But I think that was part of the ethos, even in that situation. The Corkers were not calling for the police. You know, I mean, there's obviously a lot of reasons for that.
I I do think we need to start wrapping up here. I'm still seeing some hands, but Odelia, do you have a burning comment? Sure.
One thing that I witnessed a lot in 2020 is that the rapid response team had members of the fire department on their riot line. They'd always have like two people from the fire department that were there to aid for medical issues. And I cannot tell you, I never saw them actually helping a protester that was injured. And two, I can't tell you how many times I saw the fire department members on the line actually helping police and enforcement and abuse of protesters. So like, I think that's also, and if you notice that the endorsements, anything that comes from the Portland Police Union, anybody that's running for office, right below that will be the fire department. So there's definitely this like weird dynamic between the fire department and the police that also need to be addressed. I know this is about policing, but somehow the fire department needs to be addressed when they're engaging in something, when they're interacting with the police.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think we need to move towards wrapping up. I think there's so much here. I think just over and over again, we're hearing themes of trust and distrust. And honestly, we've talked about this within PCCEP quite a bit. This is, I think, one of the more challenging topics that we have dug into as a group since I've been in this role for about 2.5 years. And, you know, even within our own group of 13 members, the variety, the diversity of opinions and ways to look at protesting and policing and all of those dynamics there's just a great breadth just within our group. And we've heard a lot of opinions in the room. We know there are many, many opinions outside of this room. It's a really tough issue to dig into, but certainly hearing some themes come through tonight. So we really appreciate everyone coming out, especially in person. It's so great to see a lot of people in person and sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you so much to Robert for joining us for this conversation and sharing your work and your fantastic film. And I think I'm going to hand it to Ashley to officially close us out. If Jorge has a comment, okay. And we do have some meetings in November too, so I'll hand it over to Ashley.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're, so yeah, what's next? I think PCCEP, we're not meeting until November 13th, where we have our community engagement subcommittee meeting. Agenda will be posted probably by next week, so hopefully go ahead and tune into that. Always a good time.
At that meeting, we'll be working on the Veil of Darkness analysis recommendation for PPP to analyze their stops data, and we'll also be talking about pretext stops some more.
Awesome. Yeah, so tune in for that. And then, yeah, there's some just resources here on the deck of how to contact PCCEP. And somebody's telling me to highlight community members can give written public comment in advance of future PCCEP meetings. Yes.
Yeah, if we saw, what am I saying? We would love to see you at our future meetings. We are digging into a lot of great stuff right now. Some really good work being done around stops data and pretext stops. So yeah, please join us at any upcoming meeting. You can find all of our info on our website, or if you just Google PCCEP, or you can find us on social media. All right, with that, I'm not exactly sure what time it is. It's sometime around 8:30, and this meeting is adjourned. 8:40.
Recording stopped.